Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to study biography, works, and career of Katherine Mansfield. So let us begin. Kathleen Mansfield Murry was born on 14th of October 1888 and died on January 9, 1923. She was a New Zealand writer and critic who was an important figure in the modernist movement. Her works are celebrated across the world and have been published in 25 languages. Born and raised in a house on Tinakori Road in Wellington suburb of Thorndon, Mansfield was a third child in the Beauchamp family. She began school in Karori with her sisters before attending Wellington's Girls' College. The Beauchamp girls later switched to the elite Fitzherbert Terrace School, where Mansfield became friends with Mata Mahupiku, who became a muse for early work and with whom she is believed to have had a passionate relationship. Mansfield wrote short stories and poetry under a variation of her own name, Katherine Mansfield, which explored anxiety, sexuality, and existentialism alongside a developing New Zealand identity. When she was 19, she left New Zealand and settled in England, where she became a friend of D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf, Lady Ottoline Morrell, and others in the orbit of the Bloomsbury Group. Mansfield was diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis in 1917 and she died in France aged 34. Mansfield had two elder sisters, a younger sister and a younger brother. In 1893, for health reasons, the Beauchamp family moved from Thorndon to the country suburb of Karori, where Mansfield spent the happiest years of her childhood. She used some of those memories as an inspiration for the short story Prelude. The Beauchamp family returned to Wellington in 1898. Mansfield's first printed stories appeared in the High School Reporter and the Wellington Girls High School magazine in 1898 and 1899. Her first formally published story, His Little Friend, appeared the following year in a society magazine called New Zealand Graphic and Ladies Journal. In 1902, Mansfield became enamored of Arnold Trowell, a cellist, but her feelings were for the most part not reciprocated by Arnold Trowell. Mansfield was herself an accomplished cellist, having received lessons from Trowell's father. Mansfield's time in Bavaria had a significant effect on her literary outlook. In particular, she was introduced to the works of Anton Chekhov. Some biographers accuse her of plagiarizing Chekhov with one of her early short stories. Catherine Mansfield returned to London in January 1910. She then published more than a dozen articles in Alfred Richard Orage's socialist magazine, The New Age, and she became a friend and lover of Beatrice Hastings, who lived with Orage. Mansfield's experiences in Germany formed the foundation of her first published collection, In a German Pension, 1911, which she later described as immature. In 1910, Mansfield submitted a lightweight story to Rhythm, a new avant-garde magazine. The piece was rejected by the magazine's editor, John Middleton Murry, who requested something darker. Mansfield responded with a tale of murder and mental illness titled The Woman at the store. Mansfield was inspired by his this time by Fauvism. Mansfield and Murray began a relationship in 1911 that culminated in their marriage in 1918, but she left him in 1911 and again in 1913. The characters Gudrun and Gerald in D.S. Lawrence's Women in Love are based on Mansfield and Murray. Charles Granville, sometimes known as Stephen Swift, the publisher of Rhythm is a magazine, absconded to Europe in October 1912 and left Murray responsible for the and magazine debts the magazine had accumulated. Mansfield pledged her father's allowance towards the magazine, but it was discontinued, being reorganized as a Blue Review in 1913 and folded after three issues. Mansfield and Murray were persuaded by their friend Gilbert Cannon to rent a cottage next to his windmill in Colesbury, Buckinghamshire, in 1913 in an attempt to alleviate Mansfield's ill health. The couple, Mansfield and Murray, moved to Paris in January the following year with the hope that a change of setting would make writing easier for both of them. Mansfield wrote only one story during her time there, something childish but very natural. Then Murray was recalled to London to declare bankruptcy. Mansfield had a brief affair with the French writer Francis Carco in 1914. Her visit to him in Paris in February 1915 is retold in her story An Indiscreet Journey. At the beginning of 1917, Mansfield and Murray separated, but he continued to visit her at her apartment. Ida Baker, whom Mansfield often called with a mixture of affection and disdain her wife, moved in with her shortly afterwards. Mansfield entered into her most prolific period of writing after 1916, which began with several stories including Mr. Reginald Peacock's Day and A Dill Pickle being published in the New Age. The New Age is a magazine. Virginia Woolf and her husband Leonard, who had recently set up Hogarth Press, approached her for a story, and Mansfield presented to them Prelude, which she had begun writing in 1915 as the Alloy. The story depicts a New Zealand family configured like her own moving house. She wrote The Man Without a Temperament, the story of an ill wife and her long suffering husband. Mansfield followed Bliss 1920, her first collection of short stories, with the collection The Garden Party and Other Stories, published in 1922. At the Bay, The Doll's House, The Garden Party, A Cup of Tea were written in Switzerland. Mansfield finished The Canary, the last short story she completed on 7 July 1922. Mansfield was a prolific writer in the final years of her life. Much of her work remained unpublished at her death, and Murray took on the tasks of editing and publishing it in two additional volumes of her stories, The Dove's Nest 1922 and Something Childish in 1924, and a volume of poems, The Alloy. Now her collections Marriage et l'amour 1921, The Voyage 1921, Her First Ball 1921, Mr. and Mrs. Dove 1921, Life of Ma Parker 1921, Sixpence 1921, The Daughters of the Late Colonel 1921, The Stranger 1921, The Man Without a Temperament 1921, At the Bay 1922, The Fly, The Garden Party, A Cup of Tea, The Doll's House. These all were published in 1922. A Married Man's Story, Honeymoon, Taking the Whale, The Canary. All these were published in 1923. So, friends, that was all about Mansfield's works and her biography. So, this is all for this lecture. Thank you.